Hi everyone, my name's Tati and I have schizoaffective disorder. As some of you might already know, I was diagnosed back in 2011, and for 5 years following my diagnosis, I was on and off my meds, in and out of psych wards, and until 2016 when they changed my medication from a pill a day to a shot a month, and I have not been back to the psych ward since. But since I did spend quite a lot of time in psych wards throughout the years, I wanted to share my experience in those places because some of the places were amazing and then some of the places felt like downright torture. One of the main differences between the psych wards that actually felt like I was being cared for in the proper way and the psych wards that felt like I was just being medicated and locked up. The main difference came from our levels of freedom that we had. So, the first psych ward that I ever went to and stayed at for, I think it was about 2.5 months, felt more like a prison than a rehabilitation center or a psychiatric care center. We were allowed so little freedom. We actually had a level system in which we needed to do certain things and avoid certain behaviors in order to deserve the right to even spend time outside in the grass just on the grounds. And even if we reached level 5, which was the level at which we were allowed to go outside on the grounds, we were only allowed to do so if accompanied by another level 5. Now, this was my first hospitalization. I arrived there completely disconnected from reality, and I was expected to follow classes on cognitive behavioral therapy and meditation classes that felt like torture because I was just spiraling in my thoughts nonstop, and actually created a long-term resistance to meditation because I wasn't doing it by choice. I was doing it because I wanted to go sit outside in the grass and breathe fresh air other than the few seconds it took to walk from one building to another in a straight line. Well, not straight line, but one after the other in a line when we changed buildings to go to the cafeteria. There were very few other moments in which we were allowed to go outside. Otherwise, we were stuck on our ward, and there were so many rules to follow that instead of feeling like I was in a safe place in which I could potentially open up about what I was going through, I felt evaluated, I felt judged, I felt trapped. I just reverted back to the little girl who just wants to be a good girl and follow the rules and not think for myself, and just I was willing to do just about anything to get out of that place. So I followed the rules. But that place certainly did not feel like a place of care for people with mental health issues. And yet that's what it was supposed to be. That's what they called themselves. There were very, very few constructive methods used over there. I was also heavily over medicated while I was over there. It was just an awful experience all around. What made a big difference between that place and other psych wards that I've been to is actually the level of freedom that they gave us in the other places. One place in particular that I was sent to a few times, they just gave us a lot of freedom. Even on the closed wards in which you weren't allowed to go on the grounds, they still had an indoor, or not an indoor, but they had a courtyard in the middle, in the center of the building, an open air courtyard. It was beautiful. It had trees, it had grass, it had a little path, it had a mural that patients had made themselves a few years prior. And it literally felt like my own little Garden of Eden, my own little safe haven. And so it was interesting because that particular psychiatric hospital never became a source of trauma for me. I enjoyed the time I spent there. And it's not that they didn't have any classes that you could attend, they did, but you were under no obligation to do so. And it's true that whenever I first came into the psych ward, I was in no state to follow any classes. I wasn't even aware there were classes. But we did have some structure in terms of medication time, meal time, lights out time, tea time. And in the beginning, when you're stabilizing from psychosis, it's important for you to have that basic structure with the freedom to be yourself and just exist and draw, maybe be artistic, talk to other people, have a walk in the garden, in the courtyard. Anything else is asking too much in the beginning. After a while, once I started to stabilize on meds, I would start getting interested in art therapy classes, exercise classes, mindfulness classes. In my experience, it's always helpful to stay in the psychiatric hospital for at least a week after the time it takes you to get really bored. Be bored for a week before you even consider leaving the psych ward. Anything else is too soon. At least that's my experience. Now, it's important to note that psychiatric hospitals serve a very, very specific purpose, which is to stabilize people who are a danger to themselves or others. Their responsibility and their role in your life does not go beyond that. They are a safety net for you. And if you're sent to the right one, if you're sent to a good psychiatric care hospital. But you're going to keep being sent back to these psychiatric hospitals if all you do when you get out of the psychiatric hospital is take your medication and see a psychiatrist. Psychiatrists are great for prescribing meds that you need in order to regulate a disorder you may have. But there's a lot more to it. There's a lot more to feeling well on the long term than just taking the meds. These antipsychotics that I'm on, yes, they have been effective at keeping me out of the psych wards, but for a long time, I didn't have much going on in my life. I was very isolated. I didn't have much of a life. I was a couch potato for a very long time. And it's only with the help of a therapist and the help of a life coach that I've been able to really get my life back on track. And if you truly want to heal, if you truly want to feel better have more governance over your life, have better emotional regulation, you can't just rely on the medication. You have to do the work. And don't just settle for any therapist. You might have to try a few before you find the right one for you. But it's worth persevering in trying to find the right therapist or life coach for you. And it needs to be someone that you feel that you can trust. Someone that you feel has your best interest at heart. Someone that you feel will show up for you as much as you show up during your sessions for yourself. And the more you understand yourself, the more your actions are in alignment with your values, the better you're gonna feel in your life. So I think that's about it for now. I just wanted to share my experience with psychiatric care and really reinforce the importance of empathy on the part of the staff in the psychiatric care sector. Empathy goes a long way with hypersensitive people. I hope my experience is able to shed a little bit of light on the type of care that is helpful for people with schizoaffective disorder who are going through an acute crisis and psychosis and are in need of the proper psychiatric care. So just to summarize a little bit, if the more empathy you have, the more receptive we'll be. And it's helpful for us not to feel like we're in a prison, to feel like we have governance over our own choices, such as whether or not to go to certain classes, whether or not to attend meditation, whether or not to wake up on time for breakfast, without fearing the repercussion of negative consequence just because we're listening to our body that tells us we need a little more sleep that morning. People with schizoaffective disorder already feel like they've lost a lot of control over their lives, over their minds, and take away our free will and our right to make our own choices is highly harmful to our sense of self and our sense of identity. And that's what we're struggling with in the first place. It's an identity crisis. All right. I think I've said about all I had to say. I hope this was helpful. I hope this was informative. And remember, I'm just sharing my story, my experiences, and I hope it helps. And I wish everyone a great day, and I'll see you next time. Love to all.